You're listening to 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, Clutch with Keon Rose, hour number 2 of the show. Thank you for joining me today. I want to talk a little bit about perception. Perception is reality in a lot of cases, right? Which I'm not crazy, right? There's such a thing as subjective reality and objective reality. And if you ask people which is more real, they're going to tell you it's the subjective reality, right? Like the only thing that you can prove to be real is the stuff that you know, is the stuff that you see, is the stuff that you witness, right? There's, I suppose, a reality out there that we all witness, but that is a little bit harder to prove, right? Like I know when I feel mad. Someone else can't tell me that I'm mad because I know. And that's about as real as anything there is to me. I mean, that's just sort of the way it is. I personally don't like it. I like things to be objective. I like things to be in their proper place. But it's interesting because we see how perception changes things in sports all the time. For instance, Kyrie Irving is a guy. You would say, based on his vocabulary, based on his upbringing, that Kyrie, went to good schools, went to Duke University, that Kyrie is a smart guy. And I'm not saying he isn't, by the way. I'm just saying that when you take into account that Kyrie Irving thinks that the earth is flat, and when you take into account a number of other things, like whatever it was that he was doing on TV yesterday, it gets your perception changes in terms of taking him seriously, right? You're able to rationalize all the stuff that you don't like about Kyrie in conjunction with his beliefs on the shape of the earth. For better or worse, right? Fair or unfair. That people believe that, okay, if you have a certain belief that may be out there, maybe a bit conspiratorial, in some cases unscientific, that we shouldn't listen to anything that you say, which is silly, right? That you can be really right about some things and really wrong about other stuff. And you're not a person who's either entirely false or entirely true, because that's not how people work, okay? But people are also really good at categorizing one another. So if we think that you have said something that is false, we just throw you in the category, right? So I'm looking at the Detroit Lions yesterday, beat the Giants into powder. And my first thought in that game was, wow, why does the NFL keep giving us games with big market teams who are mediocre? Right? We get big market teams who are mediocre in the NFL in prime time fairly frequently. And my only thought is that, honestly, the NFL doesn't have a way to market itself outside of its markets because they don't want stars. That was my first thought. And my second thought was, wow, yeah, the Giants are bad, but the Lions are playing really well. In fact, the Lions are playing pretty great. And how much of us not talking about the Detroit Lions has everything to do with the fact that they're the Detroit Lions. Right? Like somebody on Reddit was saying, if the Detroit Lions, if you took the Lions and made the Lions and put the Lions in a Cowboys uniform, that whole roster, just made that entire roster Dallas Cowboys, we'd be going crazy about them. We'd be going crazy about how good they are. We don't care because they are the Lions. We don't suspect that their start is legitimate. We don't suspect that they're really good, even though Matthew Stafford led this team to the playoffs a couple years ago. with ridiculous passing numbers. I think he threw about 5,000 yards that season and looked about as good as any quarterback could have looked. Yes, they underachieved in the playoffs, but also the defense isn't great, at least not the secondary. That defensive line is monstrous, and we saw that last night. But that secondary is not great. And that running game last night was there, but hasn't always been there for the Lions in the past. And so, yeah, obviously they floundered in the playoffs. But how much of what the Lions are has everything to do with the fact that we just look at them and see the Lions and we don't trust them and we don't believe when they're good. Because if we put that team in the uniform of America's team, we probably pay closer attention to that team, right? So I was thinking about that, and I was going, well, who in college football reminds me of that? Who in the SEC specifically reminds me of that? I thought, well, there's a couple of teams that remind me of that, right? Georgia's ranked 11th in the nation, and they're 3-0. And if the Georgia Bulldogs were UCLA with the same start over the same opponents, we'd be singing the praises of Kirby Smart right now. And I mean on a national level. Because I think a lot of the success of the SEC has rubbed people the wrong way on a national level. And I think a lot of the ignorance surrounding the SEC, like the fact that there are great quarterbacks here that I don't hear people talk about. I hear Shea Patterson's name coming up a little bit more these days, but should have been in the conversation previously because we know he can play. Like, that should have been a guy that we were excited to go see at the beginning of this season. And there wasn't a whole lot of talk about him, if any at all, in a national sense. And I look at Georgia and I go, well, the recruiting class that Georgia pulled in this summer, combined with a healthy running game, before Jacob Eason got hurt, a freshman quarterback who played well and looking to progress to the next level, a defense that is brilliant. Where's the love for Georgia on a national level? Like, and there isn't. Georgia just doesn't play in a place that's glamorous or sexy. And that shades the entire perception of that team, which stinks because they're really good. Mississippi State, who Georgia is also playing. By the way, that's a 7 o'clock ESPN game. Night game. Looking forward to it. Georgia, Miss State. And it's pretty incredible. Those two teams, I don't think get nearly enough love. Miss State is now 17th in the nation in terms of ranking. Should have been ranked before. And I said this before week one. And I'm not some kind of savant. You know what I mean? I'm not a genius. I just have eyes, and I've been watching Mississippi State. And like, we all knew Nick Fitzgerald was going to be good. Like, everything we heard out of spring training, spring practice, everything we heard out of training camp, we knew Nick Fitzgerald was going to be good. We know that Dan Mullen wins like 10 games a year. Why did it take so long for Mississippi State to get ranked? Where's the love and respect for Georgia? Because if Georgia were Stanford, we'd be all over it, right? Now, my thing is, for a lot of college football news too, I read a lot of national news outlets. And so I guess part of me is like, I end up getting a little bit upset at the national media, probably more than the typical fan, because I'm watching all the games every week, and then I'm looking for that same recognition on a national scale, and I'm not seeing it. And I do think that the previous success of the SEC rubbed people the wrong way. It's not like SEC fans were really humble about the success of this conference, right? Like if you're an SEC fan, you were kind of letting everybody else have it. You were letting the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the ACC and the Pac-12, you're letting them all have it. Like, yeah, we're better than you. And the SEC had a down year last year. And I don't think that there's any doubt about that. I thought, halfway through the season, I thought, well, maybe this might be an anomaly. But no, it was an actual down season last year. Alabama was great. Everybody else was in. Like the next closest team wasn't that great. And I think that everybody on the national scale could not wait for the SEC to be bad. And they were last year, and everybody buried you all. And now you're back. I mean, it was a 1 year down year. It wasn't an eternity. You're back. You've got the defenses. You've got the running games. You've got the quarterbacks. Just about every team has got a reliable quarterback outside of, I don't know, Florida, Kentucky. Everybody else has got somebody reliable at least. No respect. No respect. And I'm waiting for it. Like I'm looking for it. If you took Georgia and put them in the Pac-12, if you took Georgia and put them in the ACC, don't they get more respect? I think they do. If you took Miss State and you put them in the Pac-12, you put them in the Big 10, do they get more respect? I think that they do. I was listening to Colin Cowherd on Fox Sports before the season started, and Colin was ranking the top coaches in the SEC and Big 10. Why it is that he chose those two conferences to mash together to then rank the coaches, I have no idea. But dude didn't give any attention to Dan Mullen, which is just a crime, just an absolute crime, how little attention Dan Mullen's been getting. Right? And Dan Mullen, can come off as kind of an odd dude, but he's a brilliant coach. I mean, is he the greatest recruiter? No, but every year in the SEC West, he comes away with 9 to 10 wins. And God bless him, I don't know how. Honestly, like you look at his recruiting classes and you look where they rank and you're like, how? Dude's just collecting 2 stars and 3 stars. How are there victories coming out of this? I don't know. Like, I really don't know. You take that guy and that team and you put them in the ACC, right? You make Miss State Florida State. They get more recognition. They don't have to wait till week 3 to finally be ranked in the top 25. Perception's reality. Like, there's a certain level of SEC schools don't have great quarterbacks, and you don't expect them to have great quarterbacks. Ergo, nobody talks about our quarterbacks. And no one's talking about how solid Fromm has been. They're not talking about Fitzgerald, and they're not talking about Patterson. They're not talking about Shermer or Bentley or Dormady. They're not. Right? Like, we're talking about Josh Rosen. I was watching the Heisman Watch before week 3, to be fair, before Saturday. And they were talking about Josh Rosen, and honest to goodness, I was confused because maybe we're just not watching the same guy. But even before the Memphis game, Josh Rosen's been bad. What on earth are you talking about? Right? Like the Texas A&M game that UCLA wins. Rosen is terrible for 3/4 of that game. And when things start going his way, he gets lucky. He made a bad throw that should have been intercepted, that bounced off the hands of a defender that resulted in a touchdown. I mean, that's not good. That's bad. He looks bad. Josh Rosen is still considered one of the top quarterbacks in college football. I was on Twitter Saturday night, and I was watching people defend Josh Rosen and the Memphis game. How? He threw 2 terrible interceptions, including the awful pick 6 to end the game. I'm not saying all of a sudden that this is just Josh Rosen is the worst quarterback ever. What I'm saying is if Josh Rosen is getting that kind of love, where is the same love for Shea Patterson? Where is the same kind of love for Fitzgerald? Where is it? It's buried under the perception that the only thing that happens in the SEC is defense and running, and it's also buried in the perception that Alabama is the team that is this conference and everybody else is just kind of here, orbiting. Which is true to an extent, but only because Alabama would be that in any conference you put them in. If you put Alabama in the Pac-12, they'd be the best team in the Pac-12, and everybody else would be there, orbiting. If you put Alabama in the ACC, they'd be the best team in the ACC, and everybody else would be there, orbiting. That's only true because Alabama is that great, not because everybody else consistently is that terrible. Last year was not a great year. You can look at the numbers statistically. You could look at the win-loss records. It wasn't a great year for the SEC. But if you want to tell me that means that the SEC, because they were down last year, is bad this year, you're out of your gourd. Like, you might want to file a police report for your mind and see if the cops can help you find it, because you're gone, man. There's no way that's true. Not if you've been watching any of these games. Right? And like, we're talking about teams having a chance to make the college football playoff. I don't think a lot of these teams have a chance, right? Like we penciled in Ohio State early on. I don't think Ohio State can make it. Right? Like, I think they might be able to turn their season around to something respectable if they can get more out of JT Barrett, who they've decided to stick with. I think you can get something respectable out of the season if you're Ohio State. I mean, we've talked about Oklahoma State possibly making the playoff. Look, Mason Rudolph is a heck of a quarterback, and Oklahoma State can score in bunches, but that team's not making the playoff. They're just not. Oklahoma? Well, I mean, I want to give Oklahoma a lot of credit. They beat Ohio State, but Ohio State doesn't look that good right now. Like, what does it mean to have beaten Ohio State? I don't know. Teams we're not talking about making the playoff. Georgia. Right? Like, Georgia's schedule is not that tough. They're playing really well. Their quarterback is a freshman, so at some point, like, you assume if they stick with Fromm continues to get better. After Miss State, which I think is their toughest game of this season. Left, anyway. I mean, depends on how tough you think Notre Dame should have been. But Miss State, I think, is the toughest game they have left, because after that, they've got Tennessee, who I think they're better than, Vandy, Missouri, Florida, who I think they're better than, South Carolina, Auburn, who I believe they are better than, Kentucky, and Georgia Tech. I mean, this is the toughest game that they're going to play at this moment in time is Mississippi State. They win that game this Saturday. Why are we not talking Georgia in the college football playoff? Because even if they were to go to the SEC title game and lose to Alabama or something, and I don't think that Alabama is a shoo-in for the title game. I think they're the front runner, but I don't think that they're a shoo-in. If you take that, why wouldn't they be in the playoff? Why aren't we considering them for the playoff? Or Miss State? If Miss State beats Georgia, right? And their only loss is to Alabama. Or they managed to beat Alabama, who looks vulnerable. I'm just saying. Bama does not look unbeatable. Then what? I mean, you've got to consider these possibilities, and no one is considering these possibilities because everyone is operating under the assumption. When I say everyone, I mean the national media operating under the assumption that the SEC is Alabama and that's it. Perception is reality, and everyone's perception is off. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, and NoogaRadio.com.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
In East Ridge, the police say a body was found inside of a van outside the Stop and Go Food Mart on Ringgold Road. The police have not identified the body to the public yet because the family has not been identified. An update on a man who was found beaten outside of his house in Bradley County. His wife says that his injuries were so bad he had to be driven to Chattanooga to be treated. The victim was outside watering his nursery when two men approached him and beat him. The victim's wife says she believes the motive is robbery, that they wanted her medication. The Bradley County Sheriff's Office has not confirmed that detail. Criminal Court Judge Don Poole has reduced the bond for Jonathan Walker, the man accused in the Woodmore bus crash case. He's reduced the bond down to $50,000. If he does meet bond, he'll still have to wear a GPS monitoring bracelet, and he will not be allowed to drive. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 FM. Now.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News. NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
Don't punish your gun by leaving it in a corner. Shoot it, sell it, or just toss it. Okay. Don't toss it. Make money with it. Shooter Supply and Indoor Range, the hottest gun shop in town, finds buyers for your extra firearms. Put cash in your pocket today. Are ARs cluttering your closet? Rugers rusting in your rec room? Shooter Supply and Indoor Range in Hickson will take your firearm and put it on consignment. To you, that means no money out of your pocket with a small fee when the gun sells. Larry at Shooters has got an online store. He's licensed to ship anywhere. It's as if Shooter Supply were giving your billfold cover fire. Get the biggest number of bucks from the smallest Derringer to the longest Barrett. Maximum price, shortest time. What a great deal. Shooters-range.com. Shooters-range.com. That's shooters-range.com. Check with Larry.
When my brother and I opened the first Jets Pizza, we believed if we made the best pizza, customers would find us. So we made fresh dough each day, used fresh toppings, and premium mozzarella cheese. 300-plus stores later, we still do.
Try Jet's famous 8-corner pizza with premium mozzarella cheese and one topping, now just $11.99 for a limited time only. Jet's Pizza, the best pizza in town. 3600 Hickson Pike.
Life is short. Eat better pizza.
Let's get Jets.
Hi, this is Eric Pelton. Taxes, accounting, business advice. I've got a neat brochure, 12 ways to improve your business profits. Come on by for a free consultation and we'll give you a copy. E.J. Pelton Company, 332-3339.
I have the best steak selection in town. Name of the business is Don's Meat Shop, and I'm Donnie Raines. Just ask for Donnie. I make over 20 different types of sausages. Most of them are great for grilling. We have the best selection, best quality. We have the hard-to-find items. Don's Meat Shop.
Whether it's a car accident, storm damage, or fire, When the unthinkable happens, it doesn't matter if you've saved money in 15 minutes. In this moment, it doesn't matter if your neighbor has the same insurance you do. What matters is your independent insurance agent and the company behind him have you covered. Auto Owners Insurance, the no problem people. Goss Insurance in Hickson. Goss, 875-2500.
Hi, I'm David Crockett, and I'm here with David Tulis, and we're having a little discussion over who's the number one Nooga centrist. If you want to keep up with free market ideas, then read Nooganomics.com. David Tulis, the blogger with the biggest pen.
This is Chrissy.
And this is Summer
of Summer Cares. There are too many homeless veterans in Chattanooga. Please help us in our Shoebox for Veterans campaign. You can fill a shoebox with hand warmers, hand sanitizers, hand wipes, cough drops, razors, shaving cream, toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, shampoo, deodorant, snacks, socks, gloves, and even a small blanket.
And make sure you drop your shoeboxes or your shoebox items off at Nooga Radio Studio on Hickson Pike across from Bojangles below Goss Insurance, Sonic on Hickson Pike next to Front Runners, or Alpine Crest Elementary School.
Please join us at the Community Kitchen in Chattanooga on November 10th from 11 to 12:30 and help us distribute these care packages to the homeless veterans of Chattanooga. No veteran should ever go homeless.
Nooga Radio News 92.7 FM's Fast Forecast now. 85 degrees from Nooga Radio News, the home of Sean Hannity every weekday from 3 to 6. A sunny day today, getting up to 87 for the high end, 66 for the low. Partly cloudy as we end the day. Tuesday, 86 for the high end, 66 for the low. Rain possible on Tuesday afternoon. And on Wednesday, 86 the high, 66 the low. Rain possible for our Wednesday. That's your fast forecast now.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio. 92.7 FM and 95.3 HD4. News Talk Nooga Radio.
You're listening to 92.7 FM Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Clutch with Keon Rose. And Tennessee schedule came out. Actually, the schedule for the entire SEC was released today. And Tennessee has the most interesting schedule of the bunch, to me. And the reason why that is the case is simply Florida, Georgia, back-to-back. It's plain and simple, right? Like, that's about as simple as it gets. Florida, Georgia, back-to-back. And then also they get Alabama and South Carolina back-to-back. Alabama's not really a rivalry game. It is, right? I get it. Third Saturday in October and all that. But you got to win some of them to be a rivalry, man. That's all I'm saying. You got to win one every now and then. And getting close to winning doesn't make it a rivalry. It just means, well, that's a better loss. Okay. Doesn't make it a rivalry. I'm just saying you gotta win some of those. Haven't really won many of those recently. But anywho, that important date, and then South Carolina, which I hope is becoming a rivalry, because that would be fun. I'd like a little bit of a chippiness between South Carolina and Tennessee. But next year, September 22nd, Florida, September 29th, Georgia. And to me, I like it because there's going to always be drama surrounding Tennessee so long as Butch Jones is the head coach at Tennessee. I've come to embrace this, right? I've come to accept this as a fact an unchangeable reality of watching the Vols. That until such a time as Butch Jones manages the clock like a professional football coach, I have no reason to believe that there will not be drama surrounding this team. And Tennessee playing Georgia and Florida early in the year gives you a sense of that SEC East picture very early on. It gives you that. And then for me personally, because I'm a huge fan of stories, I'm a huge fan of storylines, it gives you storylines to play with from that point on in the season forward. When that happens in September, that Tennessee has already played Florida and already played Georgia, there's only but a handful of possibilities from that. Either Tennessee beat them both, split the games, or lost them both. And at that point, you know exactly where they stand. You know exactly where they stand. And if they beat them both, because we saw that last year, right? And there was still drama. There was still drama. And Tennessee beat them both last year. Had the 21-point comeback against Florida. Then they played Georgia, beat Georgia on the Hail Mary at the end of the game. I mean, that's what it is. And then they still managed to blow the East. Because, again, like I said, we're never without drama with this school. But I like it that way. I prefer it that way, rather than they play late. Because you think it's going to be great, but like, what if the season's already out of hand before you play late? It's not as fun. Like, you have to be in it all year long for those games late to really matter. That's what the NFL learned the hard way, right? That the NFL, I think, in 2012, on accident, had a bunch of divisional games late in the year. And those games were awesome. So the NFL started pushing all the divisional games late to the year. And what you find out is that unless it's one of those years where everybody's in the mix and everybody's in the hunt, then the divisional games late in the year don't really matter. That the divisional games really only matter when there's something on the line. So you have to have some divisional games early in the year while it looks like everybody still has a chance, and you have to have some late in the year so that there's some drama for the last handful of teams jockeying for playoff position. I like it early, for me personally. Then I know that you're in it, and Tennessee is still capable of making you sweat bullets, even if their biggest rivals have been defeated. Even if their biggest rivals have been defeated, that guarantees, as we learned last year, not a thing. Like, not one thing whatsoever. There's just going to always be drama. It's a fact of Butch Jones being your head coach. And you're going to have to come to grips with this as a fact. So, yeah, I'm excited about the schedule. The other schedules are not crazy, right? Like, I mean, they're all good games. Most of them are conference games. The out-of-conference games are not insane. And again, without this year playing out and without us knowing who's going to be great and who's not going to be great, there is no, there's no way to find out the magnitude of those games. No way. So, Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. And shift gears to the NBA one more time, because I find the NBA to be endlessly fascinating in a lot of ways, but I also find the NBA to be specifically endlessly fascinating in regards to the money of that league, right? And what I find to be interesting about the NBA is that 14 of the 30 NBA teams last year lost money. right? Now, the NBA is a revenue sharing league, right? So the before the payout, they lost money. And then the NBA splits up its revenue that it makes from TV and other deals. And I find it interesting that the NBA lost money, that 14 teams in the NBA lost money. Right? The Hawks lost money, which to me is why this story is interesting and of note. But not just the Hawks, the Nets, the Cavaliers, the Pistons, the Grizzlies, the Bucks, the Magic, the Spurs, and the Wizards all lost money. Right now, if you were to, first off, if you count this by a different metric, which is operating income, which discards the debt obligations, then only 10 teams lost money rather than 14. But I feel like double-digit teams in a 30-team league losing money is still too many teams losing money. Right? Like that's, and the Hawks lose money by either metric. If you go by net income, net income after revenue sharing, and or by operating income, which gets rid of the debt obligations, the Hawks still lost money regardless. And why people are worried about this is because the wage gap in the NBA is as such that teams in bigger markets are capable of getting superstars. And teams in smaller markets are not. And the NBA is a superstar-driven league. This is not baseball, okay? I watched the movie Moneyball the other day. I'd never seen it. I watched the movie Moneyball the other day, and boy, what a great movie. I actually want to read the book by Michael Lewis, but the movie is essentially about Billy Beane and the Oakland Athletics and how they turn to data and turn to analytics to field a baseball team that didn't cost very much, that was still capable of winning and going to the playoffs. Right? That interesting concept all on its own, but it doesn't work that way in the NBA. Right? In the movie Moneyball, they exploit the market inefficiencies and they're able to get baseball players that simply produce the numbers that you want. Right? And they went about it through all kinds of unorthodox means to get the stats that they were looking for that could add up to wins. Right? So in the movie, the stat that they're looking for, the most important stat is on-base percentage. I think that all of that gets blown out of the water in a sport where LeBron James can exist. In a sport where LeBron James, it does, like whatever stat you're looking for, LeBron can get it. So you can't simply create a basketball team based on the data, the analytics, and the numbers. You need stars. Stars generate those numbers. Which numbers? Presumably, all the numbers. Which ones do you want, right? Like, you got a star like Russell Westbrook, and you wind up being a 6th seed in the playoffs when, you know, people were thinking you'd be lucky to be an 8th seed if you made the playoffs at all. Why? Well, because Russ can get you any numbers you want. So, yeah, the gap between the teams that can get stars and the teams that can't get stars is important. Right? Now, part of it is that the revenue shares get paid out, but also teams that go over the luxury tax are paying out more in the sharing of the revenue, right? Like the reason why Cleveland, despite the fact that they have LeBron, is one of the teams that lost money after the revenue sharing is because they're over the luxury tax, and they're over the luxury tax by an awful lot. But like I said, the Hawks, not over the luxury tax. And even after receiving money from revenue sharing payouts, quite frankly, still lost money, and it doesn't matter what metric you use. Now, the NBA signed a $24 billion TV deal, which is supposed to give everybody more money, right? Like the cap was going up. That was the storyline that we were hearing last year. The cap is going up and up and up and up, even though the cap actually went down last year, which surprised a whole lot of people. And those teams who signed bad contracts, believing that those contracts would eventually become good contracts because the cap was going up, got punished because then their bad contracts got even worse when the salary cap went down. Then the players that they paid way too much money became an even higher percentage of the salary cap that they were having to pay. But if you're a small market team, this is worrisome for you, right? And I wouldn't say that Atlanta is a small market team, but Atlanta feels like a small market team because Atlanta is one of those cities where there's a bunch of stuff to do. Miami also feels like a small market team as far as, again, Miami, there's a bunch of stuff to do. If the Heat aren't playing well, it doesn't matter. We'll do something else. We don't have to go watch basketball. Like there are cities where the basketball is what you're looking at, where the basketball is what matters, right? Indiana with the Pacers. There's nothing else to do in Indianapolis. You get tickets to the Pacers game, you go to the Pacers game. Atlanta's a city with stuff to do. If the Hawks aren't good, and there's plenty of reason to believe that the Hawks will not be good this year, if the Hawks aren't good, guess what? If the Hawks aren't good, guess what? Do something else. You lose money that way. And you're not getting any playoff revenue. And all of this affects your ability to go out there and get some kind of superstar, right? This is where the Moneyball situation works for the NBA, right? Like if you want to go out there and Moneyball the league, the way to Moneyball the league is in the draft. The way to Moneyball the league is to get so many draft picks that you draft a superstar for relatively cheap and try and keep that guy. Try and win a title as fast as you can with the superstar that you drafted, rather than try and chase some expensive guy in free agency who's probably going to wind up in LA or Boston, right? Because the Lakers are on this list too. The Lakers stink. That's why they're on this list. The issue, of course, is that the Lakers aren't going to stink forever. And the moment that the Lakers are good, they'll be off the list. I can't imagine that Atlanta gets off the list that easy. And this is in a world, by the way, where NBA teams go for billions and billions of dollars. But not if they're not going to be generating money. Not if they're going to be generating money to a very high degree. Clutch with Keon Rose, 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Jumping back to college football now. That's it for my NBA tirades. Jumping back to college football. Because I think it's very fascinating that the unbeaten teams that are left in the SEC are Georgia, Mississippi State, Alabama, and Vanderbilt. And all of those teams are putting their unbeaten records on the line. Now, I suspect that Alabama will beat Vanderbilt. They're 18.5-point favorites over Vandy. They're playing at Vandy in Nashville. And I just find it fascinating that Vanderbilt is one of the unbeaten teams. But that Georgia-Mississippi State game is going to be great. That game's going to be absolutely fun. Georgia, at the moment, 5-point favorites over Mississippi State. I'm a little surprised. I'm a little surprised because I think this game is closer than that. I think this is a 3-point swing either direction. I really do. This is a tough one to pick. Game is in Athens, Georgia, and I also think that the over-under is 48.5. I think it's a little high. A combined 48.5. I think that's a little high. I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of fireworks in this game on the offensive side. I think there's going to be a lot of defensive ball played here. I think we're looking at a chess match, possibly. 3-0. The Bulldogs win. That makes the SEC West interesting, right? And when I say the Bulldogs, I mean Mississippi State. I just realized just now, yes, they're both the Bulldogs. I get it. Mississippi State. If Mississippi State wins, that makes the SEC West a whole lot more interesting. Right? Like it makes that fascinating because Mississippi State and Alabama will be both unbeaten in the SEC West, and they will be on some kind of a collision course. They meet November 11th. Can Mississippi State, should they beat Georgia on Saturday, remain unbeaten? I think so. After they play Georgia, they play Auburn. Auburn, offensively, underwhelming. I was hoping that they'd get a lot more out of Jarrett Stidham. He's been okay. And yeah, it was a little bit premature, I think, to crown Jarrett Stidham the savior of Auburn football. The reason why I did that, I think, is because I really believed in Gus Malzahn. I thought, well, Gus Malzahn has been missing a quarterback. That's what he says he's been missing. And the last time that Gus Malzahn had a great quarterback, he had Cam Newton. And that offense won a national title. Now, granted, there's a whole lot more that you can do with Cam than you can do with Jarrett Stidham. But I don't know. I expected the offense to drastically improve, and it's improved, but I wouldn't call what's changed anything in the ballpark of drastic, right? So do I think Mississippi State is better than Auburn? Yes, I do. Do I think they're better than BYU? Yes. I think they beat Kentucky. I think they beat Texas A&M. Right? I think they beat all those schools. I think they beat Missouri. No, sorry. I think they beat UMass. That's who they play. They play UMass, and then they play Alabama. Alabama might be undefeated by the time those teams meet as well. Just looking at the schedule. Even though Alabama looks really vulnerable. Right? I don't think that they beat Vanderbilt, but Alabama has had a bad habit of just being upset by opponents that you wouldn't think. Right? But I also did this last year. I tried to play the which team beats Alabama all season long game. And, you know, we went all the way to the national title game with that one. That wasn't as fun as I had hoped. But Alabama probably going to beat Vandy on Saturday. Probably going to beat Missouri the week after. I think they'll beat Texas A&M. I think they'll beat Arkansas. I think they'll beat Tennessee. I think they'll beat LSU. Because we saw Mississippi State stymie LSU, and now the blueprint, I think, is out there. I think Nick Saban takes it, adopts it, probably even improves on it, and stymies LSU. And then they play Mississippi State. I think both of these schools could go against each other late in the year, undefeated. That would be fun. That would be absolutely amazing. And I think that game is going to be great because I think Mississippi State is horribly, horribly underrated. Tragically underrated. Like, how is that school not getting a ton of respect? Right? Like, Dan Mullen has to be one of the most valuable coaches in all of college football. Right? Like Nick Saban is the most valuable. But whenever I read about Dan Mullen, you hear things like, well, Dan Mullen's a good coach. He's a solid coach. He's a fine coach. And as I've mentioned before, the last thing that you want to be referred to in sports is solid. Solid is another way of saying average. Dan Mullen's not average. Right? Like, he's better than average. He's turned below average to average players, or at least players who were considered that, into stars. Right? Like, the amount of players he's gotten to the NFL, it's a very alarmingly high number. That guy is criminally underrated. And I hope his team stays undefeated. I do. And I hope they get the chance to go up against an undefeated Alabama later in the year. That would be my hope. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, and NoogaRadio.com. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.